Good evening. I'm Jeff Bennett.
And I'm Amna Nawaz. On the NewsHour tonight, a major breakthrough. Israel and Hamas reach a hostage and ceasefire deal that could end the 15-month war in Gaza.
Firefighters battle high winds that threaten to further spread the wildfires blazing across the Los Angeles area.
Many of President-elect Trump's cabinet picks face congressional scrutiny, giving a glimpse into how they would carry out his agenda.
If we stay on the road we're on right now, less than 10 years, virtually everything that matters to us in life will depend on whether China will allow us to have it or not.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by...
On an American Cruise Line's journey, travelers experience the maritime heritage and culture of the Maine coast and New England islands. Our fleet of small cruise ships explore American landscapes, seaside villages, and historic harbors, where you can experience local customs and cuisine. American Cruise Lines, proud sponsor of PBS NewsHour.
In 1995, two friends set out to make wireless coverage accessible to all. With no long-term contracts, nationwide coverage, and 100% US-based customer support. Consumer Cellular, freedom calls.
The Judy and Peter Bloom Kovler Foundation, upholding freedom by strengthening democracies at home and abroad. The Walton Family Foundation, working for solutions to protect water during climate change so people and nature can thrive together. Supported by the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, committed to building a more just, verdant, and peaceful world. More information at macfound.org. And with the ongoing support of these institutions. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the NewsHour. After nearly a year and a half of brutal war in Gaza that widened across the region, a ceasefire and hostage deal was struck today between Israel and Hamas.
The deal between the warring sides was mediated by the United States, Egypt, and Qatar and will start this weekend. The Biden administration had spent many months trying to force the parties toward a deal, but a final push in coordination with the incoming Trump team helped get to this agreement today. Nick Schifrin is here with more. So, Nick, how down to the wire was this?
Well, Jeff, a senior administration official says that the U.S. didn't know there would be a deal until just minutes before announcing it, after Hamas tried this morning to insert new objections. But tonight, after 15 months of one of the most intense aerial campaigns in history, the deadliest ever war on Israeli soil, and the deaths of tens of thousands of Palestinians, there is cautious hope the ceasefire will hold. Tonight in Gaza, a celebration. And in Israel, relief that after 467 days of war, in just 72 hours, the guns over Gaza will go silent.
At long last, I can announce a ceasefire and a hostage deal has been reached between Israel and Hamas.
The three-phase deal begins with a 6-week ceasefire. Hamas will release 33 Israeli hostages, beginning with 5 female soldiers on Sunday, and 2 Americans, Sagi Dekelchen and Keith Siegel. Israel will release nearly 1,000 Palestinian prisoners, including hundreds serving life sentences for terrorism, a surge of humanitarian aid into Gaza. And Israeli soldiers will leave population centers but remain along Gaza's borders, including on the Philadelphia corridor with Egypt, allowing Palestinians to return to their homes. Israeli President Isaac Herzog.
This is the right move. This is an important move. This is a necessary move. There is no greater moral, human, Jewish, or Israeli obligation than to bring our sons and daughters back to us.
Senior U.S. officials believe the two sides agreed now because a diminished Hamas realized the cavalry wasn't coming. Israel's regional military success gave Netanyahu political flexibility and bipartisan coordination. A senior Biden administration official says National Security Council Middle East Director Brett McGurk and President-elect Trump's Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff created a, quote, historic collaboration and negotiated side by side, alongside mediator Qatari Prime Minister Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani.
We have seen the steps that's been taken recently from the U.S. has yielded to this moment.
Today, Trump took credit, posting, quote, "This epic ceasefire agreement could have only happened as a result of our historic victory in November."
I told my team to coordinate closely with the incoming team to make sure we're all speaking with the same voice, because that's what American presidents do.
If the ceasefire holds, the two sides would negotiate a second phase for a permanent ceasefire. Hamas would release all remaining living hostages, including male soldiers, and Israel would withdraw from Gaza completely. And if the two sides get that far, the third phase would return the remains of hostages killed in captivity and launch Gaza's long-term reconstruction with foreign troops providing security, as laid out yesterday by Secretary of State Antony Blinken.
Given the costs, especially the human costs, we have a responsibility to ensure that the strategic gains of the last 15 months endure and lay the foundation for a better future.
Those costs began with the October 7 terrorist attack. Gunmen killed more than 1,200 Israelis and kidnapped more than 220 people, holding them in what former hostages call awful conditions. Today, more than 90 remain in Gaza. Officially, at least one-third are still alive. The war has transformed not only Gaza, but also the Middle East. A brutal fight in Lebanon that beheaded Hezbollah helped lead to a new government less beholden to Hezbollah. The overthrow of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, a chief Iranian ally. And an Israeli attack on Iran itself that destroyed much of its air defense and missile production.
We're handing off then to the next team a real opportunity for a better future for the Middle East. I hope they will take it.
And those caught in the middle hope this is an end of 15 months of suffering and agony. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Nick Schifrin.
For more on all of this, we turn now to two NewsHour regulars, David McCoskey of the Washington Institute for Near East Policy and Hussein Ibish with the Arab Gulf States Institute in Washington. Thank you both for being here. Hussein, we'll start with you. President Biden today made clear that he laid out the precise contours of this agreement back in May.
Right.
It was, of course, almost agreed to in July. Why now?
Well, and even it had antecedents going back to January and even November of 2023. So these ideas have been around for a long time. But I think the two inflection points are the election of Donald Trump and the pressure he put on Prime Minister Netanyahu, which builds on pressure from the Israeli public and the Israeli military to make such a deal. I think Trump was very clear that he did not want this war to go on during his inauguration. And on the other hand, major change of power within Hamas, inflected mainly by the fall of the Assad regime, which signals the rise of Turkey and Qatar in the region at the expense of Iran and Hezbollah, and shifts power within Hamas away from the gunmen on the ground in Gaza who did the October 7 attack, back to the politicians, the Politburo, that have left Qatar but are now gathered in Turkey. And the main regional card that Hamas can play now is not the military links they have with Iran, but the political and diplomatic links they have with Turkey and Qatar. And Turkey and Qatar don't want this war to go on. So between pressure on those two sides, you got a deal.
David McCoskey, there was a temporary ceasefire that was in place in November of 2023 that fell apart after a week. It fell apart on the 8th day. What's different about this agreement, or what's different about the climate that might suggest this ceasefire deal might be more enduring?
Yeah, well, like you said, that was the last big point, was November, when 105 hostages were released for a few days of ceasefire. This is a much more ambitious effort in terms of not just a few days, but at least 42, and we hope it's extended. You have to, your heart goes out to the families of these hostages who are being reunited, and also to the people of Gaza who are going to get relief. I agree with Hussein that there's been a convergence of factors here. I mean, I agree with President Biden when he said it happened because of the extreme pressure on Hamas that it's been under, and Nick Schifrin in his setup piece about losing Hezbollah, they were fighting in stereo, and now Hezbollah's out of the war after the death of Sinwar, the death of Nasrallah, and the decapitation, and the weakening of Iran. Biden said the worst in decades, its weakest in decades. And the transition between governments. Clearly, the fact that I think this is unprecedented in American history, that an ingoing and an outgoing administration were sitting at the same table to get this done. They can't agree between Biden and Trump if it's light or dark outside, but they could agree on this. And but all these people want to be in the good graces of the United States, of a new administration, and I think that was also part of it as well. But I guess I disagree a little bit with Hussein in that I don't think it's just the external elements of Hamas. The people that hold the keys to the hostages are in Gaza, and those are the people who are doing the killing. And so I think without weakening them, you would not have had a deal.
No, I agree with that.
There's such fragility around the ceasefire deal, and the road ahead, of course, will be critical. But who are the guarantors? Who are the people on the ground who can ensure that both sides abide by the terms of this agreement? Because there's no international observers. There's no government structure that can make sure of that.
Really, the parties are on their own, I think. It's up to, after the 42 days, which they'll both probably live up to, both sides are going to have to decide if they want the agreement to survive the 42 days and then to go into a second phase. And they're both going to have to agree. Either side could decide to, scupper things at any moment. And certainly, especially within Gaza, a small group of people with guns could do something violent and, give Israel either the reason or the excuse to say, no, the war's back on. So it's going to be very delicate. I think if the leaders are committed to following through into a second phase, they're going to have to be willing to put up with some provocations that maybe simply have to be baked into the process. Otherwise, there are no external guarantors. There is no one overseeing this.
And moving forward, the incoming Trump administration, David, believes it has the upper hand. Of course, for a new presidential administration, leverage can be a wasting asset. How do you assess the Trump team's chances of helping both sides navigate their way toward a lasting peace?
Look, this is going to be hard. I think what the Trump administration is counting on is that Netanyahu, in a certain way, wants to turn the page and have a much broader conversation with the incoming administration about regional opportunities and regional challenges. The opportunity is a normalization deal with the Saudis, which you have to credit the Biden people. They're the ones who did a lot of the work on this, but Trump might get the benefit of it. And that's something the Israelis want very much as part of a wider mega deal with Saudi Arabia and the United States. That's the opportunity. And the challenge is, what do you deal with Iran now that it's been weakened? Some of you know I like sports metaphors, and this is like Iran is like a soccer team without a goalie. They have no air defenses right now. So is this a way to leverage getting Iran to the table on nuclear terms that they wouldn't agree to before? But this is a broader conversation that goes way beyond Gaza. There's an opportunity here for Netanyahu to engage that the administration. If everything is just Gaza, 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 it's going to be much harder to have that conversation that I think both the U.S. and Israel want to have. So I do think there is an incentive there that should not be overlooked.
In the minute we have left, do you agree? And what does this mean for the governing authority, the governing structure in Gaza?
That's exactly the problem. There's the rub, because Israel has done nothing to prepare for this day, and especially for phase 2 and phase 3. Netanyahu has refused to discuss a day after scenario. They have adamantly opposed any moves to create an alternative civil administration in Gaza. So there's a straight up forward choice between Israeli military rule, the resumption of Hamas rule, which appears to be a strategic decision Israel has made in this agreement for fear of strengthening the Palestinian Authority, which I believe they fear more than Hamas, because they think that the PA might eventually be able to create a Palestinian state. It's a continuation of the old policy of dividing the Palestinians. And I think Israel is intending to leave Hamas in de facto control of Gaza, and there's no other way to interpret this agreement, frankly.
Certainly more to come. Hussein Ibish and David Makovsky, our thanks to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The ceasefire deal will end the agonizing wait of dozens of families whose loved ones have been held hostage in Gaza. Some of them are American. As Nick reported earlier, the first phase of this deal will include the release of 2 Americans. One of them is Sagi Dekel-Chen, kidnapped from Kibbutz Nir Oz while trying to defend his family on October 7th. I spoke to his father, Jonathan, before the U.S. confirmed that Sagi was on the list to be released in Phase 1. Jonathan, thank you so much for being with us. Good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
I just want to begin with your reaction to the announcement of today's deal. What did you think when you heard the news?
Well, my first reaction is gratitude to the 2 administrations, the outgoing Biden and the incoming Trump administrations, for really being the catalyst to make this happen. It's a very rare thing, I think, in American politics today for something like this to happen. Sort of put aside the partisanship and to work together, shoulder to shoulder, over the course of the last few weeks to bring us to the brink of ending this madness in Gaza and bringing our 98 hostages home.
I know the details are still emerging, but the hostage release is likely to occur in phases, likely to begin with women. Have you heard anything about when you might expect Sagi to be released? Is it possible he could be part of this first phase?
Honestly, we really don't know. There's a lot of background noise. We will be wiser in 6 weeks, once this first phase is completed. We hope and we pray that Sagi will be a part of that, but we will be overjoyed for the families of anyone who is released. And more importantly, implore the incoming Trump administration and the intermediaries to make sure that all phases of this deal are implemented. It is simply not going to be enough to have the first phase go through and then allow the situation to deteriorate again. We need all 98 home, and the people of Gaza need peace.
How worried are you that over the next several weeks something could fall apart and the deal could fall through?
It's a constant worry. This is a very volatile situation in a very volatile part of the world in which we live. And therefore, it's premature to, for me at least, to be overly enthusiastic or optimistic, because as we have learned over the course of the last 15 months and for most of my lifetime in the Middle East, there's always a surprise and usually a bad surprise around the corner. So we need help here in the same way that we needed help from the U.S. government and the intermediaries to get to this point. We will need their help to see it through. I have very little doubt. And keeping pressure, first and foremost, on Hamas to live up to its part of the agreement, and perhaps also the Israeli government, if it in any way wavers in its commitment to getting this done.
You have been very pointed in your criticism before of the Netanyahu government. You've accused them of not meaningfully participating in the efforts to get the hostages released. On the flip side, as you mentioned, Hamas has not been a reliable partner in these talks. But in Israel, what do you think shifted that allowed things to get to at least this point today where there is a deal?
It seems to me that there's very little doubt that what put this into motion was President Trump's statement, I believe about 7 weeks ago, about hell to pay. And that rattled cages around the Middle East, Hamas, Egypt, Qatar, and also in the Israeli government. And while the plan that has been approved today, as so we learned a couple of hours ago, is pretty similar to the one that was first proposed by President Biden in late May of last year, it's clear that the urgency to get it done, no matter what, it came as a result of that statement 7 weeks ago from President Trump.
Jonathan, we've been so fortunate to have you join the show many times to share your efforts to get your son and the other hostages home. And I remember in a conversation with my colleague Nick Schifrin, you talked about the day that your son was kidnapped. You talked about how he was working to protect his wife and his children on Kibbutz Nir Oz in their home. Can you tell us how his wife is doing today and his children? Have you told them, your grandkids, that their dad could come home soon?
We have not yet shared the news about the impending agreement, or now the announced agreement, because we don't want these girls to be crushed again, a 3 and a 7-year-old. Thankfully, the 1-year-old doesn't ask a lot of questions, so there's no worries there. What we are doing will be attending the inauguration of President Trump, for them to see the power really of America in its best light, getting something good done that has to happen, not just for the good of Sagi and Israel, but really, I think, for all well-meaning people in the world. So I hope that the reunion will be as fast as possible. But for now, we're keeping the news to ourselves.
Jonathan Dekelchen, thank you so much for joining us once again. We hope Sagi is home safe with you and his family very soon. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All around Los Angeles today, residents again held their breath while firefighters worked to prevent major fires from starting or spreading. At least 25 people are dead and more than 12,000 structures have been damaged or destroyed. More than 80,000 people remain under evacuation orders. Stephanie Tsai has our report.
It was another tense 24 hours in Southern California as exhausted firefighters worked to contain flare-ups and protect hard-fought progress across the city.
The anticipated 70-mile-an-hour winds have yet to materialize. However, this could change, and we are still at risk.
As of this evening, millions remained under red flag warnings, while crews continued to battle flames from the ground and the air. The good news for weary Angelenos, winds were mostly weaker than anticipated, and the forecast for the week was largely favorable, though there's still no sign of rain.
The danger has not yet passed, so please prioritize your safety.
This morning, LA City officials faced tough questions about their preparedness and firefighting strategy. The LA Times reported the Los Angeles Fire Department chose not to extend the shifts of roughly 1,000 firefighters and dozens of engines, even as the winds worsened in the hours before the Palisades fire.
Our firefighters on the truck.
LA Fire Chief Kristen Crowley did not detail just how many extra firefighters were initially called in, but she defended the department's response.
We had the capability, and we did pull every resource in and around the area. We pre-deployed the resources in very, very calculated ways throughout the city, also not knowing where a fire might start and might not start. I think that's very, very important that everybody understands that.
More than 24 people are still missing. Dogs trained to locate human remains are now combing the debris in both major burn zones, helping hundreds of first responders complete a painstaking house-by-house search.
It's a considerable amount of structures to search, thousands, and it's going to be a long process.
Officials have charged at least 9 people for isolated incidents of looting, and LA County Supervisor Lindsay Horvath issued a stern warning to businesses that may try to profit from the crisis by price gouging.
We cannot raise the price of rent, goods, or services more than 10%. We are taking these instances seriously, and there will be consequences.
The cause of both blazes is still under investigation.
Holy!
But new video appears to show the early moments of the Eaton fire at the base of power lines in Altadena. In the Palisades, residents said flames erupted in an area where a fire had previously burned on New Year's Day.
There was no lightning, there's no power lines up there, there's no reason necessarily that a fire would just start by itself, but who knows?
As efforts turn toward recovery, residents are still struggling to make sense of a natural disaster that took so much so quickly.
You know, you stand there staring like, how am I going to tell my kids that everything is gone? And why didn't God answer my prayers and do this to me?
And yet even those who've lost everything, like Altadena resident Aaron Lubley, are helping others. He's been handing out food, water, and other essentials from the charred remains of his front yard.
You can never plan for what you do in a situation like this. All you can do is take one step forward, have the strength to take a second step forward.
Spoken like a true survivor and a good neighbor. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Stephanie Sy.
We start the day's other news with two announcements from the Food and Drug Administration aimed at protecting Americans' health. First, officials are banning red dye number 3 from food for its potential cancer risk. It was banned from cosmetics nearly 35 years ago. The dye is now found in some sweets, flavored beverages, and oral medicines. Regulators gave food manufacturers until 2027 to remove it from their products. The FDA also proposed a rule today to make cigarettes less addictive by capping their nicotine levels. Officials say that smoking is still the leading cause of preventable disease and death in the U.S. They estimate the rule could help nearly 13 million Americans quit within a year if implemented.
Today's action is a pivotal step towards reducing these monumental adverse health effects and the more than $1 billion spent per day in this country on smoking-related healthcare costs and lost productivity.
The agency announced the plan in the final days of the Biden presidency. It's unclear if the incoming Trump administration will support the proposal. The Supreme Court signaled support today for a Texas law aimed at blocking children from seeing pornography online. Critics of the measure say it violates the First Amendment by requiring age verifications like photo ID. They say parents should filter what their kids see instead. But members of the court's conservative majority pushed back, with Justice Samuel Alito asking, quote, "Do you know a lot of parents who are more tech-savvy than their 15-year-old children?" Texas is among more than a dozen states with such laws on the books. The court is expected to rule on the case by July. In South Africa, police abruptly called off a rescue operation at an abandoned gold mine where hundreds of people have been trapped underground. A rescue operation began on Monday, with crews pulling more than 240 people out alive, along with dozens of dead bodies. Just yesterday, the police minister predicted the operation would last until at least next week. The miners had been working the site illegally. Authorities first tried to force them out in November by cutting off their supplies. Civic groups said that left the miners at risk of starvation and dehydration. Rescuers will try one final sweep tomorrow. In Ukraine, officials say a major Russian missile attack forced authorities to shut down parts of its power grid today. There were no reported casualties, but energy infrastructure is critical during Ukraine's frigid winter months. Residents in Kyiv huddled together as they took shelter in the city's metro stations. Today, President Volodymyr Zelensky met Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk in Warsaw. Poland is Ukraine's neighbor and a major European ally. Zelensky said all eyes will be on Washington next week when President-elect Trump takes office.
We are waiting. I think the whole world is waiting because the United States is a strategic partner in global stability. This is my opinion. They are the main donors supporting Ukraine in its war for survival against Russian aggression. We expect continued support for Ukraine.
In the meantime, the Biden administration is ramping up sanctions on entities connected to Russia's war effort. The Treasury Department said today it's reimposing sanctions on 100 companies and institutions that had already been targeted and adding sanctions on 15 new ones. To South Korea now, where the nation's impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol is now being held in detention. He was taken into custody early on Wednesday, becoming the country's first ever sitting president to be detained. Investigators are looking into whether Yoon's declaration of martial law last month amounted to rebellion. In a video message recorded shortly before he was taken into custody, Yoon blasted his detention as unlawful.
I can't help but feel it is deplorable to witness the way these truly illegal proceedings are being forcibly carried out.
South Korea's anti-corruption agency must now decide whether to seek a court order for Yoon's formal arrest. By law, he could face the death penalty or life in prison if convicted of leading a rebellion. In space news, meanwhile, 2 lunar landers are now on their way to the moon.
And liftoff. Go Firefly, go iSpace, go Falcon.
SpaceX launched the double moonshot from Florida in the middle of the night. The landers shared the first part of the ride, but peeled off on separate routes about an hour in. One belongs to the U.S. company Firefly Aerospace and is expected to arrive in March. The other belongs to the Japanese company iSpace and is supposed to get there by May or June. If all goes well, they'll gather samples and carry out tests to help with future moon exploration. On Wall Street today, stocks jumped after a reassuring report on monthly inflation. The Dow Jones Industrial Average spiked 700 points, or more than 1.5%. The Nasdaq added around 460 points on the day as tech stocks enjoyed a rebound. The S&P 500 also ended sharply higher. And a heartwarming note from the world of classical music. American pianist Ruth Slenczynska turns 100 years old today. That is her playing Beethoven's Minuet in G major as a 5-year-old child prodigy back in 1930. She's believed to be the last living student of Russian pianist and composer Sergei Rachmaninoff. The two were known to drink tea together. Slenczynska was still going strong well into her 90s. She recorded her final album in 2022 at the age of 97. Over a 9-decade career, she played for 5 U.S. presidents, including a duet with Harry Truman. We wish her a very happy birthday. Still to come on the NewsHour, President-elect Trump's cabinet nominees in the hot seat for their confirmation hearings.
This is the PBS NewsHour from the David M. Rubenstein studio at WETA in Washington and in the West from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University.
Tonight, President Biden plans to deliver a primetime farewell address to the nation. Earlier today, in a letter released by the White House, the president said that Americans emerged stronger, more prosperous, and more secure since he took office. For more, we're joined now by White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre. Karine, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Jeff, for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
President Biden, as you well know, has dedicated 50 years to public service. As he prepares to exit the White House and conclude his career, what's the message that he hopes to leave with the American people tonight?
Well, I think what you said in that letter that the president wrote that came out this morning with a fact sheet of over 100 pages laying out what he has been able to deliver for the American people in just 4 years. He's done more in 4 years than most presidents have done in 2 terms. And I think obviously I'm going to let the president speak for himself, and he'll have an opportunity to do that when he addresses the American people later today in the Oval Address, his final farewell speech. This is a president who's been in public service for more than 50 years, senator, vice president, and now president. And he brought the experience with him to get things done for the American people. And so he's going to speak from his heart like he always does. He's going to talk about the possibilities of this country, meet the moment, talk about the future of this country, and also step a little bit backwards and say and lay out what he's done the last 4 years. So I know he's very proud of what he's been able to accomplish and looks really very much forward to this moment tonight.
And yet, according to the latest PBS News NPR Marist poll, 50% of Americans disapprove of President Biden's job performance, 42% approve. How does he reconcile this gap between what he views as achievements, infrastructure investments, job growth, climate initiatives, and the perception that he's failed to deliver?
The American people have gone through a lot in these 4 years, and so we understand that it's going to take a little bit of time for them, for folks to see the impact that this administration has had. But there are facts. There's data out there to show that the work that this president has done, building an economy from the bottom up, middle out, has mattered. Making sure no communities are left behind has mattered. More than 16 million jobs created. Let's not forget when he stepped in, thousands of people, more than 3,000 people were dying a day from COVID, and he had to turn that around very, very quickly. And I'll say this one last thing, the historic pieces of legislation that he was able to get through, whether it's CHIPS and Science Act, Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, the PACT Act, the bipartisan, like I said, Infrastructure Act, Inflation Reduction Act, all of those things, and you look at the provision, for example, in Inflation Reduction Act, they are popular. Insulin capped at $35, lowering prescription drugs, beating Big Pharma so that Medicare can really negotiate on lowering those prescription drug prices. All of those things are popular. And so he took actions that Americans really wanted, and we do believe it's going to take some time for Americans to see the full breadth of what this president has been able to do. But right now, our focus with 5 days left is to try and continue to run through the tape. What else can we do to make Americans' lives better?
I also want to ask you about the ceasefire deal that was announced today between Israel and Hamas. In the days that remain, what is the Biden administration doing to help ensure that this deal is sustainable?
So just to give you a 30,000-foot view for a second, this is the framework of this deal goes back to May of last year when this president put out the framework, got the endorsement of the world to move forward, and that is what we're seeing. That work from this administration, that work from members of his team working day and night to make sure that we get hostages home to their families, to make sure we get more aid into Gaza, and also to make sure we end this war. We end this war. And so today is a great day. We are one step forward in getting that done because of this president's leadership. And so we have been, since the election, have been consulting with the transition team, the Trump transition team, trying to make sure that we are in line and making sure that there's not just a peaceful transfer of power, but also an efficient, effective transfer of power. And the president has led by example, has kept his word, and that is exactly what we're seeing. So the president is confident. We're going into phase one of this deal, and the president's confident that it will continue because of the groundwork that we laid out over the past 8 months. Now, 15 months of this war, and now we're getting to a point where we can finally end this war.
Lastly, Karine, you held your final White House press briefing today. You made history when you assumed the role of White House press secretary. How are you reflecting on your time with the administration?
It has been an honor and a privilege to serve in this administration. Lou, you look behind me and there is the White House. And I get to walk, for the past almost 4 years, I got to walk onto this campus, go into the West Wing, sit in my office, and do the work on behalf of this president, on behalf of the American people. And it has been the best job that I've ever had. And, you know, the next thing I'm going to do is spend time with my kid. I'll have a lot of time to reflect and look back on these last 4 years, but we're going to run through the tape in the next 5 days and do everything that we can in our capacity and our power to make Americans' lives better. I know that's what the president wants us to do.
White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre, thanks again for your time this evening. We appreciate
Thanks, Jeff.
it. And you can watch our live coverage of the president's address right here on PBS at 8 p.m. Eastern. President-elect Donald Trump is still several days from re-entering the Oval Office, but some of his nominees for cabinet posts were in Senate committees for one of the busiest days of confirmation hearings in U.S. history. From the nation's top diplomatic post to a top spy to the country's top law enforcement officer, the hearings ran the gamut from cordial to confrontational.
We start with President-elect Trump's picks for Secretary of State and Director of the CIA. Florida Senator Marco Rubio would helm the State Department, and former Congressman John Ratcliffe would run the CIA. They went before senators on the Foreign Relations and Intelligence Committees this morning.
Pause. I get bilingual protests, which is, I think, is an entry cool.
As you know, that's a first here for us, at least in recent times.
President-elect Donald Trump's choice for U.S. Secretary of State, Senator Marco Rubio, sailed relatively smoothly through his nomination hearing before the Foreign Relations Committee on which he served for 14 years.
They're welcome to the other side of the dais.
On May 27th of 1956, from Cuba.
Born to immigrant parents from Cuba, Rubio would be the first person of Hispanic origin to serve as the top U.S. diplomat.
I had the privilege to be born a citizen of the greatest nation in the history of mankind and to be raised in a safe and stable home.
And home, he promised, would be the focus, a robust America-first foreign policy.
President Trump returns to office with an unmistakable mandate, a strong America engaged in the world, but guided by a clear objective to promote peace abroad and security and prosperity here at home.
In the past, Trump and Rubio have clashed.
I call him Little Marco. That's what he is. He's Little Marco.
And Donald Trump is a con artist.
Over time, they found common ground. A past supporter of aid for Ukraine, Rubio voted against last year's supplemental, saying it didn't do enough on southern border security. Democrat and Ranking Committee member Senator Jeanne Shaheen asked him about that shift.
Can you talk about how your views on Ukraine have developed and where you are now?
Once this war became what we now know it is, and that is a war of attrition, a stalemate, a protracted conflict, the dynamic on that situation has changed.
The Biden administration has sent Ukraine more than $60 billion in military aid, vowing to continue that support, quote, as long as it takes. Rubio said that has to change.
That is not a realistic or prudent position. I think it should be the official position of the United States that this war should be brought to an end.
Rubio also said sanctions on Russia could expand and that Ukraine could get a long-term security guarantee, but did not pledge continued weapons support from the U.S. under a new Trump administration. Mid-hearing, major news in the Middle East.
There's been a ceasefire announced in Gaza.
And Rubio reaffirmed that their top priority with this deal and going forward is bringing back hostages, when asked by Republican Senator Dave McCormick of Pennsylvania.
Do you agree that a permanent ceasefire in Gaza absolutely must include the release of those hostages?
Hamas has been severely degraded, but these people, that include a number of American citizens, need to be home as soon as possible.
But it was China, where Rubio has long pressed the U.S. to take a stronger stance that he insisted remains America's most potent adversary.
If we stay on the road we're on right now, in less than 10 years, virtually everything that matters to us in life will depend on whether China will allow us to have it or not.
Also today, Trump's pick for the director of the Central Intelligence Agency, John Ratcliffe, faced questions from the Senate Intelligence Committee. Democrat Mark Warner of Virginia asked about the potential for political retribution.
What assurances can you provide to this committee and to the CIA workforce that you will resist efforts to fire or force out career CIA employees because of their perceived political views or somehow their views of loyalty to the president?
Well, I think the best example of that, Mr. Vice Chairman, is if you look at my record and my record as DNI, that never took place. That is never something anyone has alleged, and it's something that I would never do.
Ratcliffe himself has been accused of releasing unverified Russian intelligence in a letter to a senator on the day of the 2020 presidential debate while he served as director of national intelligence. Democratic Senator John Ossoff of Georgia.
My purpose here is not to suggest some kind of political intent, but you've made it very clear that avoiding the politicization of the intelligence community's activities is a high priority for you. Is that correct?
Correct.
It strikes me that releasing politically sensitive intelligence, that you'd think carefully about the timing of that.
You're correct. It was my decision, but it wasn't my process.
Both Ratcliffe and Rubio are expected to be confirmed and start in their roles next week, leading the next chapter of American intelligence and foreign policy.
Senators today also questioned nominees who will be powerful forces in energy and law enforcement.
Our Lisa Desjardins was on the Hill all day, and she was in the room for the hearing of Attorney General nominee Pam Bondi. Lisa, let's start right there with a reminder of who Pam Bondi is and why her nomination is so important to watch.
Well, Bondi is well known in political circles as a very close ally, longtime friend of President-elect Trump's. But in her own right, she has a lengthy legal resume. Let's talk about it. 18 years as a prosecutor. She's a former Florida Attorney General for 2 terms. Among her priorities then was the fight against the opioid epidemic, as well as some conservative culture war issues. Now, she served on the first impeachment defense team for President-elect Trump. Then she also more recently has done election-related legal work for pro-Trump groups, including filing lawsuits in the most recent election. She's now nominated, of course, to be the top prosecutor in the country and the top law enforcement agent. She would oversee the FBI itself. Most of all, this hearing was about the Republican concern and contention that the DOJ has become politically weaponized against the right. It's a powerful agency, but the thing is, Democrats fear that if she was in this office, that she could weaponize it the other way. So there's a question of how the politics work here. Bondi told senators what she sees as her priority.
My overriding objective will be to return the Department of Justice to its core mission of keeping Americans safe and vigorously prosecuting criminals.
Now, she declined to answer a question specifically about would she prosecute people like, Jack Smith, the current special counsel who Donald Trump has spoken against. She said it's still hypothetical, but she did say she would follow the rule of law.
How did she answer questions about keeping herself independent from President-elect Trump, or also keeping her agency independent from him?
This was absolutely the focus for Democrats. They referenced the fact that Trump dismissed his first attorney general, who refused to go along with his request, his demand that he intervene in an investigation on his behalf. So Bondi was asked by Democratic Senator Chris Coons, who is your client?
The people of America would be my client. Now, it is also my job to advise the president. My client are the people of America.
Is President-elect Trump eligible to run for another term as president in 2028?
No, Senator, not unless they change the Constitution.
That was really her primary area of disagreement with Trump. She didn't really talk about the independence of the agency very much. She kept saying she would follow the law. She would not answer a question over a hypothetical illegal order from Trump. She said she didn't expect one, again, that she would follow the rule of law.
What about specific issues that deal with that rule of law? Things around January 6th, also this issue of the potential targeting of Mr. Trump's political opponents.
Yeah, she was asked especially about Trump's nominee for the FBI director, Kash Patel, who has in a memoir listed people he says who are, what is his wording, deep state members of the government. Bondi did 2 things, notably. She defended Kash Patel, and she said she doesn't think that's an enemies list. And she did say there will be no enemies list at the DOJ if she is confirmed. Now, she, of course, has been herself involved in raising claims of election fraud that, of course, unproven. She was an election denier about 2020. She was asked about the question, did Donald Trump lose the 2020 election? Here's her answer.
President Biden is the president of the United States. He was duly sworn in, and he is the president of the United States. There was a peaceful transition of power. President Trump left office and was overwhelmingly elected in 2024.
Okay, so notice that answer. I know we've been over this ground. A lot of Americans are tired of it, but it's important because of the job she is about to undertake if confirmed. Democrats pointed out she did not say that Biden won or that Trump lost. Instead, she said only that Trump won this time. So Democrats pushed back, and they say this raises important questions about her independence and her own potential bias as we sit now.
You have to be able to say no to the President of the United States. You have to speak truth to power. You have to be able to say that Donald Trump lost the 2020 election.
Now, you'll notice she is actually on track. If you look at the hearing room, I took a couple of photos of it. It really was not as well attended as I expected. I think all of these nominees at once have taken some pressure after big nominations like this. Right now, she had a very good day all in all, and she is on track to be confirmed.
You were keeping an eye on another hearing that unfolded today as well, that of her Energy Secretary nominee, Chris Wright. What did we learn?
Right, let's talk about him. He is an energy executive known especially for fracking and really kind of pioneering that industry. In the past, he has said that there is no climate crisis, But today, Amna, he told senators that the climate change is real, and he agreed that it is man-made. So there's a lot of question marks about where he really stands on that issue.
All right, Marlisa Desjardins, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Meanwhile, President-elect Trump's nominee to lead the Office of Management and Budget, Russell Vought, also faced difficult questions on the Hill today. Appearing before the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, he was pressed about the administration's plans to shrink spending and exert greater power over government agencies.
Mr. Vought previously led the office for part of Mr. Trump's first term. He's also a co-author of Project 2025. That's the controversial Heritage Foundation blueprint for a second Trump administration. Our White House correspondent Laura Barone-Lopez joins us now for more on that hearing. So Laura, remind us of who Russell Vought is and what the OMB does across the federal government.
The head of the Office of Management and Budget, Jeff, is not usually a household name, but it is an incredibly important position in the White House. And the head of the OMB oversees spending and can review all regulations across agencies that agencies write, is in charge of the president's budget policy, and is often involved in Hill negotiations. Now, when it comes to Russell Vought, Vought served in this role, as you noted, Jeff, during the first Trump administration, and he wrote a Project 2025 chapter specifically on transforming the presidency and expanding its powers. And in the time between the first Trump administration and now this incoming one, he was head of a conservative think tank, Center for Renewing America. And at that think tank, he drafted hundreds of potential executive orders and memos in preparation for a second Trump administration.
And you were, of course, tracking his confirmation hearing today. What stood out to you?
Jeff, the Republican senators welcomed this nomination, focusing more of their questions on how OMB and the Trump administration would slash what they consider wasteful spending. But Democrats pressed Vought on his track record. When he was OMB director during the first administration, under his leadership, the budget office delayed disaster relief to Puerto Rico, and it also withheld funds appropriated by Congress for Ukraine. And so at the heart of those questions from Democrats is what's known as impoundment authority, Jeff. And Vought said that he believes that impoundment authority is unconstitutional. Now, what is that? Under the law, the president is forbidden from clawing back, from declining to spend funds that are appropriated by Congress for government agencies. But Vought made clear he thinks it's unconstitutional, and that the incoming president thinks it's unconstitutional, and that could very well, they would test the limits of it and draw a court challenge. He was also repeatedly asked about his support of replacing career civil servants across agencies and firing them and replacing them with political appointees who would put President Trump first.
Do you believe that intelligence agencies and law enforcement agencies need more political appointees to keep kind of management at those agencies?
Again, I'm not going to speak on behalf of a specific proposal that the president has not made.
But what's your view? Would you support a proposal? I'm just asking, you want the job, you want it back. Would you support a proposal to put more political appointees to oversee the activities of American law enforcement at the federal level and American intelligence community?
Again, the president hasn't spoken to that matter to my knowledge, and I'm not here on behalf of my own personal views.
Now, the facts are, Jeff, that Vought, as well as Trump, throughout the campaign cycle, talked about reinstituting Schedule F, which is an executive order that would allow for the replacement of civil servants, essentially firing a number of civil servants, as many as 50,000, and replacing them with political appointees. And that's expected to be at the top of their agenda when they take the Oval Office. But ultimately, Jeff, Russell Vought is expected to be confirmed, and he's unlikely to face any resistance from Republican senators.
And he stands to be highly influential in a second Trump administration. Has he said what he wants to do in this role?
Today, he tried to create some distance between his past comments, Jeff, and what his think tank proposed versus Donald Trump's agenda. But Vought stands to be highly influential and expand the budget office. Specifically, he has talked about the fact that he believes the president can slash spending programs without Congress. He has drafted plans to use military during times of civil unrest. He believes that the president can assert more control over the Justice Department. And Vogt also supports stripping federal workers of protections. And as for agencies' abilities to remain independent, Vogt has previously said that he wants to destroy any notion of independence across agencies.
We have to solve the woke and the weaponized bureaucracy and have the president take control of the executive branch. So my belief, for anyone who wants to listen, is that the president has to move executively as fast and as aggressively as possible with a radical constitutional perspective to be able to dismantle that bureaucracy and their power centers.
Big picture, Jeff, Russell Vogt will be at the center of any of Donald Trump's plans to gut the federal workforce or to challenge Congress's power of the purse strings.
A jam-packed day of confirmation hearings. Laura Barone-Lopez, our thanks to you.
Thank you.
And that is the NewsHour for tonight. I'm Jeff Bennett.
And I'm Amna Nawaz. On behalf of the entire NewsHour team, thank you for joining us.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by
Cunard is a proud supporter of public television. On a voyage with Cunard, the world awaits. A world of flavor, diverse destinations, and immersive experiences. A world of leisure and British style. All with Cunard's White Star service.
Friends of the NewsHour, including Jim and Nancy Bildner and the Robert and Virginia Schiller Foundation. The Ford Foundation, working with visionaries on the front lines of social change worldwide. And with the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
You're watching PBS.